Today, ministers discussed how their countries are charting a credible path to the 5%. This means steady and sustained increase in defense investment. Ambitious and achievable. And while increased investment is essential, it isn't an end in itself. It is a means through which we become more capable so that we can further strengthen our armed forces and ensure they have the equipment they need to deter any adversary and defend every ally. The prioritized Ukraine requirement list Pearl remains an important mechanism for delivering urgent support to Ukraine, providing crucial US equipment that makes a real difference on the front lines and helps protect Ukraine's cities and civilians. Allies continue to contribute through this and other means. Ukraine must have what it needs to defend itself today and deter future aggression tomorrow. Finally, ministers exchanged views on wider developments affecting Allied security, including in the Middle East. Iran continues to attempt to hold the global economy hostage by closing the Strait of Hormuz. This direct assault on freedom of navigation and global commerce impacts us all. It is important that countries are coming together around plans to ensure that the strait can be open for transit, including by moving essential assets to the region. This is another clear reminder of how security challenges are increasingly interconnected, and that allies and partners have a strong interest in working closely and proactively together. We are not preparing for that last part of your question. So the assumption is, and this is exactly what the US wants, stay involved in NATO very strongly, but at the same time also expecting the Europeans, one, to spend the same as they do when it comes to the overall spending on defense, Europeans and Canada equalizing with the US, but also for the Europeans to take a bigger responsibility for the defense of the European part of NATO, with the US long-term still here when it comes to the nuclear, but also when it comes to the conventional. Don't forget that the defense of the US mainland starts in Norway. And why does it start in Norway? Because these huge nuclear submarines from Russia, if they can pass Norway, can come too close to the American coast, would pose a direct threat to the United States. This is just one example that NATO is not only there to defend the European mainland, but also to defend the US mainland. So we are in this together. But I always felt that it is strange that a very rich part of the world, Europe is a very rich, maybe the richest part of the world, needs the support of another part of the world to defend itself against the Russians, to the extent it has now, where we are over-reliant on one ally being the United States. And what you will see over the coming years is a more equal, is a shift, a gradual shift, where the Europeans take this bigger responsibility, with the United States firmly anchored in the transatlantic relationship. And the Ukrainians have been incredibly ingenious in terms of their ability to innovate, and this is one of the things we are learning all over NATO from Ukraine, for example, when it comes to the drone warfare and the anti-drone technologies. This is why we have JTEC, this joint organization in Poland, where we capture all the lessons from the war so that we can figure them in the NATO plan. So I would not be too happy if I was Putin today, but I was never happy if I was Putin, but particularly not the last couple of weeks, because things are not going in the right direction. No, what is playing out now at the moment at the level of policy directors is US contribution to the NATO Force Model. So that is a process now ongoing, but hey, be prepared for this, because we know that the US has to think, if you have multiple theater threats, how can we make sure that all the capabilities and all the key enablers are everywhere where we need them. And that means that, and this will inform us, whereas European allies and Canada, we have to focus even more than we're already doing in the future. Of course, this is highly classified because we don't want to make anyone any wiser. But this is a process in place. This is nothing new. Everybody knew this was happening, and it has nothing to do with the fact that the US wants to equalize the burden. It has to do with the fact that they cannot be everywhere at the same time. I'm afraid it's much more complicated than that, but it has not to do with the fact that it has nothing to do with what happened over a couple of weeks ago when they announced the number of 5,000 with regard then to Germany. That's totally separate from it. But I cannot say too much because it is highly classified. Well, the specifics you have seen over the last couple of weeks, the French-British initiative, the American initiative of freedom of navigation. Today, all allies were absolutely clear that freedom of navigation is a key principle. Indeed, that Iran cannot get its hands on a nuclear capability. This is a long-standing principle of NATO. As I said before, when I visited the White House early April, I also absolutely sensed the disappointment. It had to do with two things. One is that in some cases it took a bit of time before European countries were able to implement all the previous made commitments to using those bases in case of a US operation elsewhere where they would need those bases. And what you're seeing at the moment is that all over Europe, and this is from Portugal up to and including Germany and Italy and France, United Kingdom, and Greece, I'm not going to mention the whole list, Romania, Bulgaria and many others, that thousands of flights have been taking off over the course of the war against Iran. US flights. All over Europe massively. So that was one disappointment, which I understand, but I was also, I think, early able to explain that massively Europeans are doing what they committed to, and this is not NATO, these are bilateral commitments, but still very important. Then when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, when it comes to the next phase, you see now quite massively Europeans hearing the message from the US and pre-positioning essential equipment, ships and uncrewed systems and all kinds of other important contributions to in that next phase when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. And this is acknowledged by the US. I'm not going to speak for Marco or how he leaves here. Of course, he could tell you yourself. I don't think that is my position, but I think clearly European allies heard the Americans. Again, these discussions are ongoing. You have seen, of course, the French and British initiatives. This is not NATO. This is the two countries working together. Which I think it was over 40 countries signing up to the declaration a couple of weeks ago. You see now quite massively, for example, when it comes to mine hunting or demining equipment being pre-positioned. This is something, of course, where Europe is strong at. The US is not that big when it comes to demining, but when it comes to Europe, there are a lot of assets, and a lot of those assets are now being pre-positioned. You know that the Charles de Gaulle is now close to theater, so the French are massively there. But of course, this is an ongoing discussion within that coalition where NATO listens in, but of course it's not leading that. It's really led by the French and the Brits, and also by the Americans. The freedom of navigation construct, which is their call for arms. And what I'm saying here is that where there was disappointment, I really believe that Europeans have heard the message.